are live. We are live, and here we go. Big question. Did you know that people are more likely to respond to what you're saying if they like the sound of your voice? Hello, I am Sigrid Cast, strategic marketing and visibility specialist with that big vision of positioning established and bold leaders to showcase their expertise, expand their influence, and connect with high value opportunities on a global virtual expo platform where the right decision makers come to you without any limitation of location and time. And today, I have invited Rachel Pietsch, multi-award winning vocal coach, voice function specialist, the voice stylist. And Rachel is an exhibitor at our upcoming May Virtual Expo. Hello and welcome, Rachel.
Hi, Sigrid. How are you? It's wonderful to be here.
It is so good to have you here because, we're looking at presentation, presenting ourselves, and the first thing that comes to mind, that focus usually is on how we, for the make and break initial impression, how we are dressed, how we look. That seems to be such a big thing where the focus is always on. And you are sharing or telling me that it is the voice, probably in equal proportions. Would that be correct?
Well, it's actually a little bit more than that. It tends to be well, it tends to be twice as much as what we're actually saying. So our gestures and the way we appear definitely is probably just that little bit more important. But then it's closely followed by the sound of the voice and words. What we're actually saying comes very last, and it forms a very small percentage of what people are actually taking in.
So as we open our mouth, if you want to say that bluntly, we already are projecting who we are to some extent, yes?
Yes, absolutely. Absolutely. And if our voice is sounding thin or like it's struggling, then that perception is going to carry through to what to whoever is listening to us. So not having the kind of sound that reflects what you're saying is going to be undermining your message.
So, Rachel, when did you first discover about the importance of the voice? Is that something that magically, instantly came to you at some point in your time, or is it a gradual that you moved towards that and found this is what I want to focus on?
That's a really interesting question, Sigrid, because I mean, I studied voice function many, many, many years ago. As a it was at the end of a long journey of trying to find a pedagogy that would tick all the boxes for me as a teacher. Because when I first started teaching, I was predominantly working as a piano teacher and I was halfway through uni. And the singing teacher that I was working with at the time asked me to take on some of her singing students because she had gotten a part in a show and she didn't have time to teach them. And I thought, well, I've been teaching piano for a while. I had classical training. And so, yeah, I thought, why not? This just feels like an easy thing to add to my arsenal of, skills. And I found that teaching singing was very, very difficult. In fact, I was very ill prepared. So, because I really value the technical aspect of learning, I didn't feel that I had enough of that in singing. So, fast forward however many years, I went on a big long journey to find something or a way of learning as a teacher to train voices that would help everyone and be able to tap into the individual problems that we have and ultimately aim for a better sound. Now, initially I worked with singers, but I did start to work with speakers before COVID, actually, when I was invited to do a workshop for a bunch of teachers. And if you're a teacher, you know that when you first start teaching in the classroom or doing a lot of teaching, your voice is your main tool. And if you're not used to using that, you will end up with a tired voice. So I went and did a workshop for these lovely, lovely people, and it was such a positive experience for all of us. And I really saw the need to help speaking voices as well as singing voices. So I hope that answers your question, Sigrid.
Look, it sure does. It's just, we go into business and we do something, and for some of us, it can take longer than for others to find what we really love. It sounds like you really love this, and there was a journey to get there. And from what I'm hearing, it comes from a musical background, which is very interesting because
Yeah.
the voice for singers, I fully realize that how important it is because if that voice goes in the middle of a performance, I mean, that would be terrible, wouldn't it?
Yes, yes. And I mean, we do use a different part of our brain when we sing compared to when we speak. And for myself personally, I encountered issues in my speaking voice, even though I was a vocalist. And I knew how to look after my voice from a singing perspective and how to balance my voice, etc. But from a speaking perspective, I hadn't, and we're talking years ago, I hadn't thought about how to not pivot that knowledge, but to replicate that knowledge or bring that knowledge into my speaking. So I remember a job that I had. I was teaching piano all day, every day, and when I first started it, by the end of the week, my voice was really, really tired and sore, and was starting to sit in a very different place, and I was very tired. And yeah, so I had to learn how to move past those issues and look a lot more deeply at my own training as someone who uses their voice. So I use my voice, my speaking voice, very differently now compared to how I used to.
That's very interesting because I think generally speaking, if we're not familiar with that and with voice as such, we wouldn't distinguish between speaking and singing voice so much. Sure, we know, singing is a different type of a thing, but how you rework where you're working your voice, that's a very interesting aspect. Rachel, so you've come to this from a teaching background and you've really made it a business though. This is your business moving forward. So people can come to you, whether they are speakers or singers, or even just people in business who want to be presenting well. Is there a difference presenting your voice in person in a room compared to on Zoom? Because we're doing so much on Zoom these
Oh,
days.
yes, yes. I think there is a difference. I do. I think that subconsciously we tend to when we're in on a Zoom, we just tend to think, oh, I have to raise my voice. We all do it. We don't think we're going to be heard, and it doesn't matter if we we know that we'll be heard, we just generally will start to speak up. And in a way, it's called the Lombard effect. So the Lombard effect, Etienne Lombard, a French guy from I think the early 1900s, he discovered that people subconsciously raise their voice in environments where there's noise. And I think this falls into a very similar thing. When we have a subconscious trigger, we tend to raise our voice. So regardless of how manageable that space is, we just do. So that's where the issue is. And what tends to happen is when we raise our voice, we're speaking, it's like I'm going to talk an analogy here. It's like going from walking to running and having to keep the jog going. But if you're not used to that, if you're like me and all you do is walk, uh, upping the fitness level and upping the demand on the muscles is going to take its toll. And that's why speaking on Zoom can be an issue for a lot of people because we tend to speak with too much loading. We tend to speak with too much emphasis, and we are not we generally don't tend to be strong enough. So voice training can help you coordinate your voice as well as strengthen it so that you can last a distance.
I can imagine that. I think too that we kind of want to bring it through the screen somehow, isn't it? So we
Yeah.
speak louder. That is a kind of a reaction to that there. So do you find that people come to you particularly because they are aware that their voice is not helping them in the way they would like to, or is that something you then guide them to understand and know, but they just come to you because they feel maybe their voice is not lasting the distance, as you said, when they are speaking?
Yes, it's usually because they've sensed a difficulty or a something about their voice or the way that it sounds that they don't like. And my job is to I mean, as soon as I hear someone speak, I can hear the potential for that voice. I know where that voice could go. And I often use the analogy of a faded photo. We don't see all the detail and the vibrancy of the colors until we bring that photo back up to full color again. And it's or full focus, I should say. The voice is no different. So when we start to encounter difficulties for whatever reason, not lasting the distance is a very common one, and also not liking the way you sound is another. They're the main reasons people seek me out. Um, and Yes, it's only when we start to suspect that we're going to be having more of an issue that we start to seek out help. Very rarely do I have someone, pick my brains in terms of, say, a preventative thing. Like they're very happy with the way they sound, but they're just going to pick my brains and just see if there's anything that they need to know that can help keep them on track. I've only ever worked with a few people who've sought me out for that. So generally speaking, it's usually people who are either having an issue or they know they're going to be speaking in front of a room of people and they're freaking out.
So people do realize or recognize that. Do you come across people coming to you for help, thinking their voice doesn't sound very good, and you feel it actually does? They are just not hearing their own voice. Is that something that is possible?
That is such a great question, Sigrid. That's a really good question because I think there's a few things to think about. Firstly, we generally don't like the sound of our own voice, and it doesn't sound, in reality, it just doesn't sound as bad as we think it does. So that takes care of one aspect. But when I listen to a voice, like I said before, I could hear the potential for more. So I just know that when we get the voice in the right position, shaping things the right way, there is a different experience that comes into our voice, and we can learn to love the sound of our voice more. So, yeah, it's very rare that I would say to someone, um, the sound of your voice is fine. We don't need to do anything with it because I can always hear beyond. But at the same time, I'm not saying your voice is terrible. I'm saying that, it's not as bad as you think it is, but let's work on it anyway, because you might, just by working on it, you might start to like it. And because you're moving away from the sound you don't like.
I think sometimes it is that self-consciousness, isn't it? Some people really do not like to go on video. They don't like to take a video of themselves. And I would imagine the voice, the sound of their voice is part of it, and they may not even realize that. And when they do, then they would be coming to you. But I think just like generally speaking, we are perceived very different to how we perceive ourselves.
Yes.
What makes a good voice or the sound of your voice good? Is there anything around that descriptive? Yeah.
Yes, the heart of what makes a voice sound good is the resonance. How we actually sound comes from the shape in our vocal tract, how we're shaping our vowels. And if for example, I actually start to shut down my vocal tract and I'm limiting how much sound is coming through, you can tell I sound very, very different. But if I start to move my mouth and allow my vowels to be shaped in a certain way, then I start to sound, and I think, better, more resonant, more full, more open, more. My voice sounds like it's functioning more easily. People pick up on that whether it's conscious or not, and we want that to be present. But vowels and the way we actually shape our words is what gives us the resonance.
That's just given me the cue point, Rachel. What's the difference in speaking in different languages? Now, obviously, they sound different. So if
Yeah.
I hear somebody speak French, they sound wonderful to me. I love that language.
Yes. Yes.
I also like Spanish. The German is very hard, which is
Yep.
my background. And
Yep.
yet, people have a perception of those languages in relation to the
Yep.
culture of that person.
Yep.
Is there actually a difference in how different languages are spoken?
Absolutely, absolutely. So for us Aussies, us Australians, we tend to speak with more of that nasality, where we're holding a lot in the back of our mouth, and we're quite mouthy in where we actually send the sound. Whereas if we compare that to, dare I say it, New Zealand
Right.
accent, I'm so sorry, but New Zealand, their vowels are actually a bit better. The way they say their vowels position the voice more differently. And if we don't get the right vowel sound, we're going to disrupt the balance of the voice. So teaching Australians is all about reshaping our vowels. So that's just one example. Another example is, we like the sound of French. We like the sound of Welsh. We like those particular sounds because there are ways that they go about their pronunciation that causes the larynx, which is this area here, the top of the windpipe. The vocal cords live behind the Adam's apple in that, and it causes the larynx to sit in what we call a low resting position. Whereas in Australia, the way we say our vowels causes the larynx to sit up a little bit. I'm going really ocker now. Causes the larynx to sit up a little bit, and it shuts off a little bit of resonance. So when we hear those more warmer tones, the larynx is actually coming down and creating more resonance and therefore more balance on the voice. And then you have languages that, like Asian languages, that are much more tonal, and languages that are much more guttural. So there is an emphasis on a lot of the how you come into a sound, which is also called the onset. So how you pronounce your consonants. A lot of those sounds, a lot of those languages are based on consonant sounds rather than vowel sounds. So there is a lot of weight put on that, and therefore a lot of attack, which has the capacity to upset the balance of the voice as well. I find it very interesting teaching someone whose first language is an Asian language because of the way that, vowels are not formed.
Mm, that leads me to the next question. Unless you wanted to say more on this, I'm sorry, didn't mean to interrupt you.
Oh, no, that's
Oh,
okay.
good. So,
No,
so
on.
the next question is, do you find that more people with English second language come to you compared to English first language? Is there a more or less?
I would say it's on an even par. It's even keel. I don't know what the term is, but it really depends on what though, because I usually find that when English is someone's second language, they usually have a very particular focus in mind. So maybe a job interview, or they know they're going to be getting up and speaking in front of people, whatever that is.
Mm,
And yeah, whereas people who tend to seek me out, who, English is their first language, it's usually for voice difficulties that potentially are stopping them from feeling comfortable in their voice.
mm.
So yeah, they're two different reasons.
So they come sort of equally. That's not really necessarily about because English is the second language and they feel there is a difficulty there in speaking it correctly with their tonal of voice. That's very interesting because I mean in Australia we have this multicultural mix of people from so many with different backgrounds where sometimes the accent is very noticeable. And of course, the accent, that first language, creates that tone of voice for us through the way we speak that other language, I would imagine. Yeah. So
Yes.
that brings me to ask you, In regards to coming to you, looking at their own voice for business purposes, so we've said, whether that is speaking, dealing in business with others, compared to life situations where people come to you specifically for something in life that is feeling that they can't get to where they want to because of the tone of their voice. What would be the differences in how you would work with such a person? Is there a difference, and what would they be?
So, from a functional point of view, there's no difference because I would still work with the voice the same way. But someone who really feels that they're being limited by the sound of their voice, they generally they're fed up. They're willing to work, and yeah, but they do have their work cut out for them because in those sorts of cases, those people are suffering because of the sound of their voice. So it usually means that they sound extremely different, or their voice is, quite whiny, for example, or uh, quite gravelly. Um, yeah, it can be difficult to find out that, yes, you've got a lot of work to do, but at the same time, it can be overcome. And I know that, and I come back to the fact that we're Australians and we have this accent. If I can help Australians, I can help anyone.
That sounds really good, Rachel. I like that. So, lastly, emotion. I mean, we
Yeah.
do get emotional, whether we are male, female, whatever, the
Mm.
emotion can come through. How
Yes.
much does the emotion have to be worked with for the person to get that tonal range or that tone that they wish to have to be sounding more powerful, better, whatever?
Yeah, that's a great question. It's usually like in the final stages of training. It's like if I don't know if you've learnt an instrument, but I find that when I'm teaching music, I usually focus on let's just learn the song. Let's worry about the variation in volume later,
Okay.
um,
Yeah.
because it can disrupt. Developing the sense of touch and evenness and all that sort of stuff. The voice is the same. It needs to understand how to be consistent without the challenges of raised volume or lowered volume. And once it knows where the middle ground is, you can deviate from there. But it needs to have a certain amount of strength for the voice to not only demonstrate or be able to express different emotions, which again comes with different volumes, but also to last the distance, to be able to, I know that when you hang out with some friends that are really funny, you just laugh for hours. And, sometimes you can walk away from that going, gee, I need to stop laughing. This is hurting my voice. So, but I know for myself, that doesn't happen for me because my voice is fit. I can go to a loud party for hours and talk over noise for hours, but that's because my voice is fit. For most people, that's not the case. And and again, I mean, we've got to think of emotion as a heightened sense of use, because if we're laughing or if we're, shouting angrily, we're going to be using excess muscles here. If we're not on top of, hey, this is how I need to tap into my voice, not drag everything else with it to try and help it out. So, and we do that subconsciously. So, training the voice to operate, I guess, uh, isolated in an isolated way. I'm trying to put this in a way that's easily understandable.
Yes, yes.
Isolated away from any help. Um, it takes a lot of thought. It's very much this on steroids.
Right,
Very
right.
much that. And you have to be on top of it all the time, as mindful as you possibly can be. Otherwise, we think of the way that we speak, it's very habitual. And in order to change a habit, we have to challenge it over and over and over. And imagine if someone said to you, okay, you've been writing with your right hand for all your life. Now you are to write with your left hand.
Mm.
That's quite a task.
Yeah, absolutely. So what I'm hearing or what I've heard from you is that not only it habitual the way we speak to some extent because that's how we grew up. That's what, everyone around us was projecting back to us, and we were going about it in the same way. But we also need to think about having the voice fit. There's a certain level of fitness for the voice as well. That is so interesting, Rachel. There is so much more to explore. I would like to come to a conclusive little something that you could leave the viewers with around perhaps saying, what can we do ourselves to have a fit voice to some extent, in as much as we can do, and create that habit of speaking in a way that it comes across well to a listener.
Yes, well, that again is a great question, and I often get asked that. So, what I can share with you are tips to get you started, not a fix all, and suddenly you're going to be speaking better for the rest of your life, and you're
No,
suddenly
of course not. Just some tips, because I mean, if there really is something that somebody wants to work on, they would need to come
yeah,
to
yeah.
you, of course.
Yes. So if you can learn to speak as cleanly as you possibly can, cleanly meaning that we're not hearing a sense of breathiness or a sense of push and strain, that we're just speaking with a clean sound, and we're not allowing ourselves to to drop our voice down too low, right down to that vocal fry level. We keep our voice fairly buoyant, fairly up, and we don't whisper. So the reason that we don't want to whisper is because our vocal cords, there's two of them, they will part when we whisper. So when I do that, the vocal cords have parted and airflow is just whizzing on by.
Wow.
So what is defined as strength in the voice is the vocal cords coming together and resisting that airflow. But if they're apart, they can't do that. So if we get used to speaking cleanly, we are drawing our vocal cords together. That is the first thing that we need to get right in order to start strengthening our voice. And the second thing I would say is to learn to swell that sound outwards. So while you're thinking about clean sound, be very careful not to hold it here, but to just sort of let it go and to let it swell outwards. So that would be like the main beginning of how that starts, I would suggest.
Yeah,
Yeah, to
there's obviously
start
a
thinking
fair
about.
bit. There's obviously a fair bit to it, because otherwise we wouldn't have you as the voice coach, but you're much more than that. You're not just a voice coach, it's a vocal coach. It's the whole voice functionality that you look at in a really much broader spectrum, is what I'm hearing and what I have experienced from you. So, is there one final thought, tip, or something to leave the audience with for this session with you today?
Yes. Well, what I would like to encourage people to do is to be mindful of how their voice feels, not in a critical way, and just remember that our voices, they reflect so much about ourselves, and we're not meant to feel badly about ourselves. So I would encourage everyone to think about what they like about their voice, and also what they would like to improve. And that would mean that, spending the next few days or to a week just tapping into their voice, how it feels and how it sounds, and just make some observations. But you must come up with something that you do like. Otherwise, it's just all downhill from there.
Focusing on the positive. And thank you so much, Rachel. That was about how the sound of your voice opens business and life opportunities, with Rachel Pietsch, who's a multi-award winning vocal coach, voice function specialist, and the voice stylist. Thank you for your time and sharing your expertise with us today.
Oh, thanks, Sigrid. It's been a delight and a pleasure. Thanks for having me.